Like a lot of people, I was a big fan of Howard Phillips' Lovecraft. The cosmic horror, the sense of helplessness, it's good shit. Of course, over time, like just as many people who fell in love with the man's work, I fell out of love with his work. I still have a soft spot for it, in particular its adaptations, ideas, and how those ideas are reinterpreted over and over. So today, I wanted to talk about one of my first introductions to the mythos, the Call of Cthulhu, Dark Corners of the Earth. Based on the Shadow over Innsmouth primarily, with hints of a Shadow out of time, it is a pretty damn good experience as far as early 2000s horror action goes. I mean, it was released in 2006, but development hell is development hell. It's a Lovecraft-flavored experience that ultimately I really enjoy and can recommend, but you have to get the patcher. Online versions of the game have game-breaking bugs, and you need to get the patcher. It installs itself, so no big deal. The game puts you in the seat of detective, later private investigator Jack Walters. Spoilers from here on, as I summarize the game. You're introduced to a very standard Lovecraft experience as you're taken through a mental asylum and witness a suicide. You get a title drop.
And it is there I have finally glimpsed upon what lives in the dark corners of the earth.
Then take control of Jack Walters, who's been called to deal with a case. A bunch of cultists are being cultists, and they want you specifically. So you go and without any backup explore the house. I really do like Jack's dialogue as you explore the house. It's voiced with the same mildly confused monotone throughout, even though later in the game you're whispering to yourself in desperate, crazed, and insane pleas. But I recognize that its troubled development and its relative age means that it probably couldn't put voice lines for every single item for every single tier of sanity that the player can possibly be on. I can forgive it. His speech goes halfway between Lovecraft protagonist, dropping loathsomes and blasphemouses all over the place,
Blasphemous image makes me feel uneasy.
to a confused cop who shrugs and goes on with his day.
He recognized me, and it sounded like he was going to get on the level with what's going on in this joint.
After exploring the house, you find some documents, go down to a basement, and come across what might be my favorite visual in the game, a willing cultist who has had his organs removed in order to have them operate independently of his own body. You can watch his heart beat and stomach digest while he lays there completely hollow. It is disgusting and a really good introduction. You activate this old machine, and the great race of Yith come by. When I was 12 and playing this game on the original Xbox, I was really hyped. The Great Race of Yith is by far one of my favorite parts of the Lovecraft mythos, and a story about them has me, even nearly a decade later, really excited. For those of you who aren't so Lovecraft inclined, the Great Race of Yith, billions of years ago, discovered how to transmit their minds, if not their bodies, through time. So they target specific creatures and people from every race and species they can, collecting knowledge about past, present, and future. The people they swap bodies with learn all about Yithian culture, only to have their memories erased before being swapped back. Their current hosts are massive conical mollusks who live in prehistoric Australia, and that species went extinct because of a devastating war between them and the flying polyps, another group of space entities that wanted to claim Earth. Time travel is, as I believe Doctor Who once put it, extremely fucked. The Lovecraft mythos, particularly the expanded one, has a very detailed lore and history of Earth, and I really do love it. The Yith aren't actually the main bad guys in the game. I'll explain their role later, but suffice to say this was supposed to be one of 3 games, at least one of them being a direct sequel. So it sets up a lot that feels underused as a single game, such as the Yith. Jack swaps bodies with the Yithy boy, and you take back control about 6 years later. Then you get a call from someone hiring a PD to find a family friend, Brian Burnham, in the town of Innsmouth, and I was really pumped. And honestly, Innsmouth does not disappoint. It's dark, it's dirty, it's dilapidated. It's full of hostile, aggressive locals who get this close to telling you to fuck off. It feels, before you've talked to anyone, actively hostile towards you, and the fact that you are not welcome is made all too clear. Weird stuff like bodies being dragged around can be seen if you look around, and eventually you sneak into the store managed by Brian Burnham. You find booze, and you find a drunk named Zadok Allen. And this being a puzzle game, you put 2 and 2 together and help him descend further into alcoholism and depression. I really love Zadok Allen. He's a character from the original Shadow over Innsmouth. He is a man so old he remembers when Innsmouth was still Christian, and as he did not join the local cult, he is constantly haunted by his memories. And also he has some of the best dialogue in the game, bar none.
Family and those that had joined with Obed in his ways started prospering in the esoteric order of Dagon. Came into being with his Ethan sermon and that shit they do.
What?
I really do wish there's more of him in the game, but outside of this scene, there's only one other appearance of him.
God, it's the old fisherman, Zadok Allen.
So, after that, the only normal-looking person in Innsmouth comes to you. She's the old pastor's daughter, and the last open Christian in Innsmouth. She's really not liked by the esoteric order of Dagon because of her open Christianity. After that, you go to the poorhouse, walk past all the suffering people, and onto the next street. Zadok Allen told you to find a man named Waite, and you find his house, and his daughter Ramona. So Ramona says that mommy has been bad, and you can come in and wait for Waite. And you, being an extremely good person, decide to go around and use this opportunity of a naive child letting you in to stomp around the house and try and find dirt on the guy. You find the mother, who is a deep one, and she smashes down the door, keeping her contained, and she murders her own daughter. And then Waite comes home, and is sobbing over the corpse of his daughter. And he gives you a brief exposition, tells you to go to his store, which was a competitor with Burnham's, to recover some items. He's then arrested by the Innsmouth police, and you are basically told he's dead. He will be hung. He's dead.
He didn't do anything wrong.
He killed his own daughter. It don't flesh and blood. There's plenty wrong with that.
So, I really do like Ramona as well, because she really drives home the insanity that is Innsmouth. Lovecraft always implied children were involved in Innsmouth, but I don't remember him ever going into detail about the kids. Deep ones and humans can interbreed, and their children become deep ones. But Ramona is a child in Innsmouth who is going to turn into a deep one, but doesn't know it. And I really like how this innocent kid who has been as sheltered as possible from what's going to happen to her is still, because of the craziness around her, drawing things that are described by the game as horrific. It's a nice touch. I like it. So, after you go to Waite's store, you find Ruth, who is in a relationship with Billy, and she tells you that she wants to meet Billy by the old cannery, and gives you a postcard that basically will tell Billy you are to be trusted. You open the safe that Waite wanted you to open, and you find the Book of Dagon. This becomes very important later. After all this, you decide it's time for a big fat nap. So you saunter off to the Gilliman house, the local hotel, decide to be a jerk, steal his key, and check out his journal, where you discover he's a cannibal who eats his guest. And then, because the game doesn't have an alternate path, you decide to take a nap anyways, but not before locking the door to your room, and the room next to you. And then...
I'm beginning to hear a lot of fishmen right outside my door. As I try to escape in fright to the moonlit Innsmouth night, I can hear some more.
You escape them in a warehouse, you escape them in the streets, and then you just keep escaping. You escape to the sewers full of slime that hurts, and you find a person whose skin has been straight up dissolved. After that, you go up and meet the Christian girl again, and she gets killed. I can't be too mad, because everyone but the main character seems to die, but still, it is so unceremonious, and they made her seem so important before, that it just feels like they wanted to get rid of her, and didn't really have a plan for how. The next part of the game is one of the safest parts of the game, because you're going to spend about an hour trying to figure out the goddamn puzzle. After you do that, you find a federal agent who seems to know way more than he let on in the early game. He tells you good luck, and you go to break Billy Boy out of jail. It's actually absurdly easy to do. You sneak around, and you get some guns. This is where my first point of criticism comes in. Up until now, I felt scared, alone, like I was in a hostile world. I was playing this game on Private Investigate, the highest difficulty available on a fresh copy, and I assume this is the intended game experience. In Chapter 3, you get a pistol and a shotgun. Don't use the pistol. The shotgun has more than enough ammo, its spread means you can take up multiple enemies with a lucky shot, and it turns the entire game into a how many corpses can I make competition. There's a few moments later on where you're deprived of those guns, or the guns don't work, and those become the scariest parts. Everything else is mildly scary, but easily solved if you have the mouse and the sensitivity you like, and a decent aim. Survival horrors often give you guns, but there's a balance to be struck. Dark Corners doesn't strike that balance. Ammo is really plentiful, sneaking becomes a bit of a chore, and the AI is such that even for a game this old, it's really easy to exploit and hide into a corner. The game also puts you into combat-necessary areas where you have to fight, and the game kind of does such a hard right turn into action that I felt like I went from Outlast to Fear, and I'm really not sure what to make of that. I will say, though, the fact you have to remember to reload, because auto-reloading does not happen in this game, is a choice I love. It ratchets up the tension when engaging 7 enemies with a 6-shot revolver, trying to remember to reload. I also love the crazy guy in the corner of the jailhouse. He's cool, whispers about rats in the walls, and you go into a sewer with a bunch of rats to escape with Billy Boy. You gotta feed this guy a rat, and it's kinda gross because he just vores the sewer rat like it's a sweet mince pie.
Henry, the rats are dead. There are no rats on the walls.
Anyways, you escape with Billy and find yourself near the old cannery where Ruth told you to go. You find Ruth, and if you're like me, she falls and dies, and it's kinda sad, and then you reload the save to get better footage. Billy is then shot, and Ruth is then killed as well. After the game kills all possible significant female characters, the feds catch up to you. You're taken to Arkham Asylum, Lovecraft came up with it long before Batman did, and you meet J. Edgar Hoover.
J. Edgar Hoover, from the Bureau.
Who orders you to be shocked, and then tells you he's bringing you back to Innsmouth. I'd question the logic of shocking someone multiple times and then injecting them with drugs to keep them awake, and then sending them on your highly dangerous raid to capture a potential criminal, but this next part's honestly one of my favorite parts of the game. The Mars Refinery has a lot of really cool puzzles and a lot of tense moments. Hoover nearly burns to death in hot gold, thank God convection isn't a thing in this world, and you have a terrifying encounter with a Shoggoth.
You ever hear tell of a Shaggoth, stranger?
It's really fun trying to bait this thing and move past it, and it's a genuine feeling of victory when you get one over something so colossal and threatening. It's also one of the few, and in my opinion, best visual depictions of a Shoggoth. You completely feel what Lovecraft meant when he described it in At the Mountains of Madness. Not much actually happens plot-wise in the Mars Refinery, though. You get the evidence needed to sanction a full military raid, but beyond that, not much is revealed. It's a very fun level, though. Then the military comes into play, and the game gets even more actiony because you're using flamethrowers against monsters, and you can wipe out dozens of Innsmouth folk in this level. You learn magic, which is cool, and you start to delve deeper into the Lovecraft part of the Lovecraft mythos. By this point, if you're me, your sanity is really low, so you'll start hearing sounds and your character will whisper to yourself, and it's all quite fun. Unlike amnesia, your sanity never recovers. You just get worse and worse. You can kind of get better in that you'll stop actively hallucinating then, but you never recover. After you get to the Marsh Manor and learn magic and help deactivate the magic seals that keep the military out, you fall into the water and picked up by a ship. The Deep Ones attack, and this becomes my second major criticism. The Deep Ones are seriously underwhelming. Scores of them rush at you, and a shotgun blast or two is the most you'll ever need to kill them. The majority of this level is actually walking around solving puzzles or gunning down scores of Deep Ones. By the end of it all, you face off against Father Dagon, one of the 2 gods of the esoteric order of Dagon, and he is a massive Deep One who shakes and moves entire warships. And you kill him. And this is where, if you'll forgive the pretentious aside, the inevitable discussion needs to come in. What was Lovecraft's horror really about, and why does it translate really poorly into video games? So, I think that Lovecraft's horror comes from the fact you are in a world that cares about you as much as you care about ants in your yard. Lovecraft is about the earth-shattering horror that comes from the fact that you do not matter. There are gods, yes, but you serve as nothing but sacrifice, pawn, or roadblock. It's not even that you personally serve as that. Humanity, the entire existence and evolutionary history of mankind, is barely justified in the eyes of gods as nothing more than unwitting idiots to serve out their wishes. As soon as it benefits them, as the leader of the cult of Dagon says in this game,
Race is finished. It is our time now.
And those gods who see us as nothing more than pawns not to be considered as individuals, they are subservient to greater gods still, who are in turn in a vast cosmic sea of infinity, one in which we were not meant to voyage far. And that clashes really heavily with video games. Video games are most often, even when you're playing as a specific not-you character, a second-person narrative. Yes, the characters speak Jack Walters, but you are stepping into the body of Jack Walters. You are Jack Walters. You are the one solving the puzzles. You are the one shooting the gun. You are the one saving the future president. Movies and books are often passive viewing experiences. You can engage with them actively, but ultimately the goal of a movie or a TV series or a book is to immerse you in the fiction, get you to believe the fiction. But the goal of a video game is to insert you into the fiction. This makes Lovecraft's specific brand of horror very difficult to pull off well. No one wants to be told over and over again about how pointless and useless you are. No one wants to be thrashed and lashed with the ideas that everything you do is without purpose and value. It's fun to experience other characters undergo that. That's half the reason apocalypse logs are fun, because it's someone who failed. But video games, where the end state is also always the fail state, don't feel good. It can be done if it's a proper conclusion to a very specific story, if it's your own choices that lead you there, but a constant sense of unending failure with the realization nothing you've done could have saved you isn't going to feel good. Even the scariest of games that skirt really close to the idea that everything you did was pointless, like Soma, either leave it ambiguous or pull back and say, see, it wasn't in vain. And so when push comes to shove, Lovecraft stories need to adapt. As movies, as books, they can be okay. They can be great. I love reading Dagon, and I think the realization at the end of The Shadow over Innsmouth is a beautiful piece of literature. But if I was expected to be in the body of those characters, constantly having reinforced to me the hopelessness of the situation, with the end being failure inevitably, I wouldn't like it too much, you know? And this, to me, collapses the entire horror aspect of the game. It makes the gunfighting and the horror feel contradictory to it an extent, because you're still inevitably marching to the beat of a story whose conclusion is that your actions don't matter and never did. Anyways, when you're at Devil's Reef, the difficulty is insane, but also feels a little artificial because it's the first time major parts of the map start falling away and breaking. By the way, when playing this game, always avoid discolored raised or lowered patches of the ground. Traps become a significant factor, and you're pretty much on the mission of Sir Robin from Monty Python. You want to get out as soon as possible. And when you are in Yahanafle, the city of the Deep Ones, you are captured, and you need to break out of prison, and it's honestly really scary again.
Well, what do we have here? I don't believe you have an invitation to our little party.
Just check the guest list. I'm under the section for fellas that ain't ugly freaks.
Trying to sneak past people without a gun is terrifying, and the boss fight feels hopeless at first because it's a powerful wizard against a squishy human. All you have is a knife against someone who can choke you from a distance. By the way, no reason to mention this, but if you click the aim button with the knife equipped, you get a stab instead of a slash. No reason to mention it. Okay, yeah. One of the big bads can be killed in a few hits with a knife. Again, master of the arcane, leader of a cult of Dagon, almost wholly transformed into a deep one, and you stab him to death. You get a rifle right after this, if you go down to the temple gate, and then you go down to the laboratory. You find an exposition guy, listen to him, and kill him, because what's one more life on your conscience? Actually, I do like this, because if you shoot him, your sanity goes wild, and this is the first time you've taken the life of an innocent man. I really like how much weight it has. You've killed people by accident before, but this is you pulling the trigger and killing someone innocent. Anyways, you saunter around, find your way to a Yithian portal, and get teleported next to a gun. The gun has infinite ammo, and can one-shot everything in the game except flying polyps, who you encounter next. Make sure you have all your limbs patched up and all that, because these guys are really hard and scary as hell if they get close. But you get past them, and finally reach Mother Hydra, the matriarch of the cult of Dagon. She's a fish monster with boobs! You get the 11th hour superpower to possess Deep Ones, fill up her pool, not a euphemism, and zap Mother Hydra into oblivion. This brings me to another problem I have. Earlier I praised Jack's eternal commentary. You could comment on pictures on the wall, on dark corners, on corpses. I tried to get commentary from Jack murdering someone, not just killing in self-defense, but mercy killing someone. And there's none of that, no matter how much I moved or adjusted to account for the often janky positioning in the game. You can kill what amounts to a goddess. Her corpse will be in front of you, and Jack comments more on the amulet. Towards the end, Jack becomes a far more passive character, more akin to a standard RPG character who acts without talking, and it really annoys me. Even the simple whispered, "By God," by Hydra's corpse would have sufficed to show how stunned and shocked and traumatized our poor protagonist should be. Anyways, Mother Hydra's death destroyed magical barriers protecting Yahanafle from the US Navy, so you escape from collapsing tunnels of Yahanafle, and the Yith show up once again. And if you get the ending most players do, like I did, you get sequel bait where you're told there's more to be shown, and we get the cutscene from the beginning. And if you didn't catch on before, the suicide we witnessed was Jack's. The game ends with him dying, a typical end for this sort of Lovecraft story. If you somehow beat the game in under 3 hours, you get an extended scene showing that the dad of Jack was possessed by a Yithian right before you were nutted into Mother, and that explains the visions you have periodically through the game. So he's physically human, but spiritually not quite. It's never really explained. So Jack really was a squishy human, and in Lovecraftian stories, squishy humans are only fit for sacrifice, madness, or death. But he was a squishy human who murdered gods and took on entire ancient civilizations and won. There's a huge disconnect for me because he goes toe-to-toe with gods and Deep Ones and comes out on top. And then I'm supposed to believe that he's a fragile human who in the cosmic sense won't amount to much more than madness? After I just spent 3 hours blasting monsters apart, I can't believe that. It falls really flat for me. The victory feels earned. Every time you murder a god, it kind of feels earned. You use your intelligence, you use your wits, you figure out patterns, it's earned. But the defeat doesn't feel earned, if that makes sense. I don't feel like the ending of Jack's story fits everything that came before. He's helping the feds, he's burning monsters alive, he's taking on Shoggoths and Deep Ones and wizards. Lions and tigers and bears! And the idea that he'd just be abandoned and left for dead, another insane asylum patient, doesn't really do it for me. You're marching to the beat of a story whose ending is that you will always die, but the rest of the story is about how awesome and cool you are when you're killing these things. It's about you doing death-defying escapes and defying the gods multiple times. And that's sort of the tragedy for me. You know, even if the game falls flat as Lovecraftian horror, it's a damn solid game anyways. The gunplay isn't awful, the mechanics are good, the puzzles are quite fun, the visuals and the graphics got me sucked right in. If you like Lovecraft, the game is full of obvious fan service, and I legitimately really do like this game, and if you like old horror games, I can recommend it. It just feels like it's trying to be standalone, sequel-bait, Lovecraft horror, survival horror, restrained, overt, a stealth-based game, a first-person shooter, all at once. It never really gets to be any of them. I'm not opposed to a Lovecraft-flavored story in a different genre. I mean, hell, one of the coolest games to take inspiration from the cosmic dread of Lovecraft, Bloodborne, is a splashy meat fest of murder and butchery entirely from the player character. I think the problem is that this game tries to be too loyal to Lovecraft while trying to find its own identity. It follows a plot structure familiar to Lovecraft, long expositions and periods of trying to piece together what's happening, dramatic examples of evil and monstrous things between slow periods of walking contemplation, culminating in horrible realizations, madness, murder, and death, while also trying to be its own Lovecraft-flavored action horror. And trying to blend those two tones makes something that feels insecure in its own action, like it'll take a hard right and hard left turn between disarmed defenselessness, puzzle-solving, sneaking, and gunning down dozens of monsters. And while all of those are fun to do, having them together in the same product makes something that is at once lumpy and consistent, like it knows what it wants to be, but just doesn't commit. I want to reiterate, this is a good game. It just could have been so much more. Anyways, hail Dagon, Aya Cthulhu, and thank you for watching. A specific thanks to my patrons who have been surprisingly okay with this content switch. I promise I'm doing actual writing too. I'm just trying to find my own footing right now between this and university stuff. And if you're still watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and wash your fucking hands.